Dostoevsky, The Demons, and the Confessions of Stavrogin. As we all know, Dostoevsky was an avid reader of the great classics. This is why, in his youth, he joined the Petrashevsky circle, where he was exposed to different ideologies and philosophies. In 1849, the Petrashevsky group was arrested by Nicholas I's secret police due to their subversive ideas amidst a revolutionary atmosphere in Europe. Young Dostoevsky, having been a revolutionary himself, gained a deep understanding of characters attracted to radical ideas. His arrest and the subsequent mock execution became a defining moment in his life. Dostoevsky believed his life was about to end, but also held a belief in some form of afterlife. This confrontation with eternity marked a transition in Dostoevsky thinking, shifting from a focus on earthly life to exploring religious and metaphysical realms. The 4 years Dostoevsky spent in a Siberian prison camp exposed him to the harsh realities of Russian life, providing him with an insight into the Russian folk character. His experiences led to the regeneration of his convictions. Dostoevsky realized the vast cultural and spiritual gap between the upper-class intelligentsia and the peasants, making genuine understanding and a tolerable future seem impossible until this gap was bridged. He also recognized the importance of a sense of freedom to the human personality, which he observed among his fellow convicts. Acts that may seem irrational to others were driven by a deep need for self-expression and the assertion of one's crushed personality. Henceforth, Dostoevsky deemed the reliance on rationality or reason as the utmost folly in governing human life. Initially repulsed by the barbarities committed by his peasant fellow prisoners, Dostoevsky's perception gradually transformed. He realized that their crimes were often provoked by and revolted against the merciless cruelties that they had endured. Amidst their brutal surface, he discerned glimpses of kindness and gentleness, reminiscent of the peasants on his father's estate. Especially as, despite their misdeeds, they recognized their wrongs and humbly bowed during Easter Mass, chains clanking. Dostoevsky's unshakable faith in the innate Christian virtues of the Russian peasantry, obscured by their repellent exteriors, became a crucial yet contentious cornerstone of his later philosophy. Upon returning to Russia in 1860, after serving in the army as a common soldier and an officer, Dostoevsky encountered a transformed social and cultural atmosphere. Belonging to the 1840s generation inspired by French utopian socialism and influenced by German idealism, he now faced the dominance of the 1860s generation led by Chernyshevsky and Dobrolubov, who hailed from priestly families. These intellectuals, disenchanted with the church, embraced social political radicalism, influenced by atheism, French materialism, and English utilitarianism. Russian radicalism acquired a new ideological foundation, Chernyshevsky's doctrine of rational egoism, or selfishness. Simultaneously, the country went through a momentous shift in its social political climate. Tsar Alexander II decided to abolish serfdom, which deeply impacted Dostoevsky. His strong opposition to this detestable enslavement had led to his exile in Siberia. The Tsar's abolition, achieved without the bloody revolutions witnessed in Europe or the ongoing civil war in the United States, further reinforced Dostoevsky's conviction that Russia could find solutions to its social problems within itself rather than relying on Europe. He had long believed that the Russian people, particularly the peasants, would not respond to the revolutionary agitation propagated by the intelligentsia, who offered essentially European solutions. His greatest fear was that such agitation would impede or hinder the reforms pursued by the Tsar Liberator, extending beyond serfdom to encompass the army, the court system, and other areas of governance. Returning to the literary scene of the early 1860s as the editor of journals Vremya and Epocha, Dostoevsky championed the doctrine which urged the European Russian intelligentsia and the upper class to reconnect with their native values, while they would bring back the perceived civilizing benefits of their European education. This aspect gradually diminished in significance. Dostoevsky believed that the estranged intelligentsia bore the responsibility of bridging the chasm by assimilating the beliefs and psychology of the people rooted in their traditional religious faith. On the other hand, the radicals, dissatisfied with the terms of serf liberation, incited unrest. Dostoevsky opposed their agitations as they provoked the reaction he feared. Moreover, the doctrine of rational egoism clashed profoundly with the convictions reshaped by his arrest and years in the prison camp. In his novel, The Idiot, Dostoevsky endeavors to portray his own ideal through Prince Myshkin, a perfectly beautiful man akin to Christ, whose luminosity inspires others, yet succumbs to tragedy due to the incompatibility between his universal Christian compassion and the limitations of his human nature. In a poignant declaration, the only direct expression of his religious convictions, Dostoevsky wrote, "To love men like oneself, according to the commandment of Christ, is impossible. The law of personality on earth shackles one. The ego stands in the way, but Christ was a perpetual, eternal ideal to which man strives, and according to the law of nature, presumably human nature, should strive." These somber contemplations find their embodiment in the narrative of Prince Myshkin, indubitably the most poignant Christian protagonist in the realm of modern literature, whose psyche mirrors Dostoevsky's profound musings on the significance of Christ's incarnation in human existence. In Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky had merely imagined the potential of radical ideas leading to murder. However, now, an underground group led by Sergei Nechayev had actually assassinated one of its own members, a student of theology, presumably out of fear of betrayal. Dostoevsky seized upon this horrible event as confirmation of his gravest concerns regarding the morally perilous consequences of radical principles. During his years of exile, he had come to view these principles as an infection spreading from European society to the Russian body politic. Initially intending to hastily compose a political pamphlet addressing the Nechayev affair, he found himself drawn into a work that expanded in scope and complexity, taking much longer to complete than anticipated. Ultimately, it became, in part, a reworking of the theme of generational conflict, previously masterfully explored by Turgenev in Fathers and Children, albeit in a later stage. The weak-willed yet charming and fundamentally humane Stepan Trofimovich Verhovensky, a liberal idealist, personifies the generation of the 1840s. His son Peter represents the disastrous culmination of the rational egoism of the 1860s, exhibiting complete cynicism and ruthless machinations. Peter applies Nechayev mercilessly Machiavellian ideas and incites murder. This theme intertwines with that of Stavrogin, a character carried over from the life of a great sinner. As Joseph Frank once put it, Stavrogin is a glamorous, Byronic dandy, resembling Eugene Onegin, who has lost his religious faith and seeks a cause to which he can devote his strength. The Devils stands as the most intellectually rich among Dostoevsky's great novels, almost an encyclopedia of Russian 19th century culture, filtered through a witheringly derisive and often grotesquely humorous lens. It showcases Dostoevsky's underrated talents as a satirist like no other work. Later on, Dostoevsky embarked on a journey to Moscow, driven by his desire to meet with his editor Katkov once again, and if possible, secure an additional advance. However, his main concern lay with the fate of two recently submitted chapters known as Tikhon's, or more colloquially, Stavrogin's confession. These chapters depicted a disturbing account of Stavrogin, a central character in The Devils, engaging in the seduction of a 12-year-old girl. As the story unfolded, Stavrogin's lack of intervention when he realized she intended to take her own life was depicted, accompanied by his perverse and sadistic anticipation of her eventual demise. Understandably, there arose doubts regarding the suitability of publishing such scandalous content. The fate of these chapters remained uncertain for the next 9 months, leaving Dostoevsky in a state of suspense. In the meantime, a letter penned to his wife from Moscow revealed his uncertainty about securing additional funds. Despite its evolution into what Dostoevsky referred to as a poem rather than a mere pamphlet, incorporating the intertwined threads of Nechaev's political theme and Stavrogin's tragic quest to blur the boundaries between good and evil, The Devils still retained enough elements of a pamphlet to provoke the ire of those who, while not condoning Nechaev's methods, sympathized with his revolutionary aspirations. One of the most frequently cited passages from the novel features Shigaliev, a radical theoretician, who shares his disillusionment with the notion of absolute freedom and reveals his disturbing conclusion of total despotism. He contends that the only logical solution to the social problem is to reduce the majority of humanity to a state of physiological equality, akin to a herd of cattle, leaving only 1/10 of the population as a distinct ruling class. The critic draws a parallel between such ideas and the madness depicted in Gogol's Memoirs of a Madman, likening the novel to a mental hospital housing contemporary individuals in a seemingly collective delusion. This persistent critique often accused Dostoevsky of populating his works with mentally unstable characters, undermining the serious social commentary he purported to present. Dostoevsky goes on to elaborate that Stavrogin represents a complete social archetype, and, I quote, "in my opinion, a Russian, someone who has become disconnected from everything native and, most importantly, from faith." It is evident that he seeks to shift the focus away from the repugnant nature of Stavrogin's action towards the moral and spiritual significance that he intends the character to embody. Dostoevsky portrays Stavrogin as a degenerate born out of boredom, yet someone burdened with a conscience, who undergoes a tumultuous and agonizing struggle to rejuvenate himself and rediscover belief. In conjunction with the nihilists, this portrayal becomes a profound phenomenon with serious consideration. Within the pages of The Devils, Shatov, a character in the novel, offers counsel to Stavrogin, one of the captivating antagonistic figures, guiding him towards the origin of the inner turmoil that drives him towards his own downfall. Shatov urges him, saying, "Seek God through labor, the labor of a peasant. Renounce your wealth and go." As the Russian populists underwent a shift in their perspective, no longer associating atheism with a rejection of Christian morality or the teachings of Christ, Dostoevsky's stance towards this new form of radicalism also underwent a noticeable change. The tone with which he approached it became milder, in stark contrast to his polemics of the 1860s, and his artistic focus shifted away from characters like the underground men, who deny the possibility of morality based on nihilistic principles, or figures like Raskolnikov and Stavrogin, who substituted Christian conscience with utilitarian calculations or a proto-Nietzschean theory of amoral indifference beyond notions of good and evil. The populists had now embraced the Christian values inherent in the Russian people's truth, and Dostoevsky believed he could appeal to them by invoking a morality they could not outright reject. Dostoevsky's long-standing ambition had been to reconcile the rebellious and radicalized younger generation, if not with the existing conditions of Russian society, then with the government that, in his conviction, presented the sole possibility of effecting positive change. However, the weakest aspects of the populists' ideology lay in their inclination to revere the Russian people and the Russian people's truth, while simultaneously refusing to embrace the underlying source of this truth, the people's inherited belief in Christ as the divine God-man. How could the populists idealize the people without also adhering to their religious faith that gave rise to all the moral values held by the people and which, for Dostoevsky, served as their sole secure foundation? The theme of the necessity of religious faith assumes a renewed significance and intensity in the novels of Dostoevsky's final period, occupying a conspicuous position at the forefront. While it had always been present, it now emerged as a primary focus, defending Christian ethics of love and self-sacrifice against the onslaught of nihilism. As we have already suggested, Dostoevsky was unable to include Stavrogin's confession chapter in The Devils. However, he revisits the Stavrogin-like character referred to as the predatory type. Dostoevsky seems to feel that he has not fully explored all the potential inherent in this character archetype. Several diary entries make reference to this predatory type, which is depicted as embodying a juxtaposition of the lowest vulgarity and the most refined generosity. The character, symbolized by the little red beetle referring to Stavrogin, possesses both a charm and repulsiveness. These references connect back to Stavrogin's confession, particularly his dream of a golden age characterized by human innocence, which Dostoevsky envisioned, inspired by Claude Lorrain's painting Achis and Galatea, one of his favorites. Within this idyllic vision, the intrusion of the little red beetle, representing Stavrogin's heinous crime, disrupts the harmony and triggers the torment of his conscience. Despite Stavrogin's rational rejection of the concept of good and evil, he continues to have a dreams of a golden age, which expose his inner turmoil of guilt and self-hatred. According to Joseph Frank, the characters in Dostoevsky's novels are not only connected by their participation in a shared narrative, but also by their ability to reflect concealed aspects of each other's personalities. Each character retains their individuality and distinctiveness, yet collectively they serve as quasi-doubles who internally illuminate each other. Although a more internal duality was originally present in The Devils in relation to Stavrogin, this motive was ultimately removed from the final version. However, in The Brothers Karamazov, written a year later, the dialogue between Ivan Karamazov and his own double, symbolizing the devil, masterfully addresses the artistic form that Dostoevsky believed he had previously mishandled. Let us make some final remarks pertaining to Stavrogin. In The Devils, Pyotr Verhovensky harbored the intention of positioning Stavrogin as Ivan the Tsarevich, the concealed heir to the Tsar's throne. This strategic move aimed to exploit the people's deep-seated loyalty to their God-anointed Tsar as a revolutionary instrument to dismantle the existing regime. Similarly, in the Grand Inquisitor chapter of The Brothers Karamazov, the Grand Inquisitor assumes the role of speaking on behalf of the true Christ, albeit in order to distort his message, undermine his influence, and ultimately bring about his downfall. The Grand Inquisitor's words reflect this deceptive scheme. but we shall say that we are thy servants, and rule them in thy name. We will deceive them once more, for we will not allow thee to come to us again. This deception will be our burden, as we will be compelled to lie. Dostoevsky's Russian messianism, with its close connection between God and the Russian people, has raised concerns about the potential reduction of God to a mere attribute of nationality, as Stavrogin had criticized Shatov for. While Dostoevsky had previously distinguished between religion and nationality in The Devils, Father Zosima's assertion that whoever does not believe in God is not going to believe in God's people appears less cautious. This raises the question of whether this belief in God's people implies a lack of belief in God. Additionally, it is noted that an Eastern Orthodox Church Council in 1872 condemned the heretical teaching that nationalistic concepts distort and challenge the Church's universal mission.
Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.